we'll find out. Hello, everyone. Thank you. Wow. I'm very gratified to come here with so many like-minded people. And I have a very important question that I believe I have solved. And that question is, where is Miss Frizzle? The Magic School Bus was a beloved documentary series following charismatic science teacher Miss Valerie Frizzle as she subjected her class of small children to an escalating series of traumatic abductions in which one student fully died from taking his helmet off on the surface of Pluto, and which were styled as educational field trips, though she was never once shown to have obtained parental permission. Now, the series aired from 1994 until 1997, when it was abruptly canceled after the tragic and completely unpredictable disappearance of the entire class, along with their teacher. Frizzle and co. reportedly departed on a field trip to learn about the decomposition process of roadkill by recklessly cruising the interstate in her heavily modified and unaccountably sentient and street-legal yellow school bus, waiting for the charismatic thump-thump-thump of inspiration striking the bus's fender. Now, until recently, we could only speculate as to what happened on that field trip. Some students from other more conventional classes reported that they heard Miss Frizzle's students excitedly discussing the prospect of once again shrinking down to the size of cells to spend some time exploring a decomposing animal. Little did they know, they would soon have all the time in the world to explore a rapidly decaying corpse. Okay, barely, that slide's not there. Yeah, okay, all right. Well, this is all going great, and I'm loving it. All right, the next morning, as search and rescue crews scoured the countryside for what the media would eventually dub the tragic school bus, a dog walker in Central Park would stumble across the body of a dead bear cub lying in a bush on West 69th Street, a detail that I would say is not nice. The discovery baffled New Yorkers and set off a media frenzy. Where did this bear come from? Theories ran wild. Some suspected illegal exotic pet ownership. Others whispered about ritualistic dump sites. Park officials insisted the animal must have been transported from outside the city, saying they didn't know where it came from, but that it was, quote, likely not the park, which makes sense. Attempts to enlist the help of bear experts were hindered by the fact that most bear experts in the United States were at that time attending a conference in Greece and were difficult to reach for comment. For months, this case lingered as one of those odd New York City mysteries, another one of those sort of alligator in the sewers style folkloric tales, until 2024, when in the midst of a campaign for President of the United States, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., for no discernible reason whatsoever, posted a video of himself telling a baffled and concerned Roseanne Barr about the time he was driving upstate when he noticed a dead bear cub on the side of the road that had been struck by a vehicle. Overcome by ravenous delirium, he slammed on the brakes and scuttled out of his nondescript white van to feast upon the rotting flesh of this unfortunate baby bear, also known as an Ursa Minor. Enraptured by this rancid carrion, sorry, made myself laugh there. He remembered only after consuming the bear's entrails that he had a steak dinner to go to that night in the city at Peter Luger's, in fact. That's true. I mean, this is all true. Irritated that he would have to postpone finishing his baby bear tartare, he tossed it in the back of the van and went to dinner. Now, that dinner ran late, and apparently he realized, by golly, he had to go catch a flight. Claiming that he didn't want the meat to go to waste, he did the only reasonable thing, dumping the carcass in Central Park and staging it to look like a bike accident. This surreal confession reframed the story from yet another unsolved New York City mystery into one of the most bizarre footnotes in the already unwieldy and implausible Kennedy family lore. Adding on to that, in fact, one of the New York Times reporters who covered the mystery of the Central Park bear cub was Caroline Kennedy's daughter, Tatiana Schlossberg. Yeah, RFK Jr.'s first cousin once removed. Coincidence? Yes. That's the only thing in this whole show that it will be a coincidence. After RFK Jr.'s revelation, she was quoted as saying, "Like law enforcement, I had no idea who was responsible for this when I wrote the story." Another thing Carol Ann didn't know is that her weird, gross cousin had unwittingly ingested the very part of the bear cub that Miss Frizzle and her students were currently exploring. The class's lighthearted edutainment shenanigans were interrupted by the feral maw of this gargantuan eldritch horror, the one-day United States Secretary of Health and Human Services. Miss Frizzle was able to gather all the children in her charge through an ingenious combination of scientific know-how and the power of friendship, and get them to the safety of the conveniently airtight and acid-resistant bus before they sank into the corrosive juices of RFK Jr.'s stomach. In this new body, Frizzle and the children thought they would be able to escape through the digestive system, but quickly found that RFK Jr.'s body was a deeply hostile place. Yeah, actually not controversial. Unlike their previous adventure in the body of one of the fellow students, RFK Jr. had eschewed vaccines, touted the virtue of raw milk and eating roadkill, and he was riddled with aggressive pathogens that had used his body not only as a breeding ground, but also as a training ground, growing stronger in the absence of a fully functioning immune system. Frizzle and her students had to flee from the horde of microbes, escaping into the bloodstream, making their way to the brain where they encountered, then defeated, a giant parasitic space worm. Sorry, not space at all. I ad-libbed that accidentally. A giant parasitic brain worm. And walled themselves up in the cyst that had formed around it. Surrounded on all sides by now macroscopic monsters unfettered by modern medicine and trapped within the festering sludge that was once the brain of a Kennedy, Frizzle's cohort of classmates fell into despair. The bus was safe for now, within the husk of the once mighty brainworm, but the horde of pathogens right outside would not give up on their prey without a fight. Miss Frizzle reluctantly activated the bus's transformer protocols and trained the more resilient children to crew the battle stations. Given purpose, panic subsided to numbness, a numbness their leader would go on to hone to grim determination. Frizzle and her cohort slowly accepted that there was no way out but through. Years passed in a bitter stalemate. Miss Frizzle's coterie, once bright-eyed and curious, grew to adulthood fighting for survival in a dystopian Osmosis Jones meets Mad Max hellscape. Miss Frizzle herself, grappling with her guilt over the hubris that had driven her to take the children in her care on increasingly reckless adventures, determined that she could no longer be the whimsical educator she once was. Accompanied by her ruthless phalanx of number 2 pencil-wielding acolytes, the former Miss Frizzle molded herself into a feared warlord known as Mrs. Grizzled. In the sonorous cavity of RFK Jr.'s skull, their battle cry rang out, "The wheels on the bus go kill, kill, kill!" More years passed. Mrs. Grizzled and her crew managed to establish tenuous control over a swath of territory in the left anterior frontal gyrus, while the rest of the brain teemed with various pernicious parasites. Still, with the majority of fighting restricted to their border regions, Mrs. Grizzled now had the logistical slack that she needed to direct her chief scientific officer, Dorothy Ann Hudson, to begin working on more aspirational projects, perhaps even a way back to the outside world. DA's research program proved fruitful as her exploratory mining expeditions into RFK Jr.'s brain resulted in the finding that stimulating certain groups of brain cells by hooking them up to the bus's battery could result in changes of the unnaturally guttural sounds that their host body frequently produced, which she was able to deduce was speech. Now, Mrs. Grizzled theorized that the outside world thought they had just disappeared, and that if they could just send a message out with any clue, a clue of any kind to tell them what had happened, that they hadn't just disappeared into like the ether of upstate New York, a rescue could potentially be attempted. The plan was put into action on August 4th, 2024, when they were able to influence RFK Jr. to tell Roseanne Barr the story of how he discovered a roadkill bear, took it home to eat, remembered that he had a steak dinner to go to, then remembered that he needed to go to the airport, and disposed of the bear in Central Park, which he said which he thought would be amusing for whoever. This was to the shock and disgust of Roseanne Barr, who was not having a fun time. The message, though, could not have been clearer. As our friend, teacher, and idol Valerie Frizzle once said, "Follow the clues. The clues are there, plain as day, and there is no more judicious interpretation of these data than that. Mrs. Grizzled and the tragic school bus have been fighting parasites in the Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s decaying brain for nearly 3 decades, and they need our help. Who's with me? TEIF, 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 TEIF. I trust no one will have any questions. Or qualifications or whatever the other one was.
Auf?
Please go ahead.
Noah, what controversial opinion about bears did bear expert Dr. Lana Carinello have to make her uninvited from the bear conference in Greece that had every other bear expert in the country?
Great question. The article did go on to explain that she was unavailable that weekend, which sounds kind of like she wasn't invited, much like Nikolai to homecoming.
I think bears are full of ants.
Bears may be full of ants. That's true. And also, I feel like RFK Jr. got just like dug in there, and if it hadn't been full of ants, he probably would have finished it. Yeah. I don't know if that's like a burn to Nikolai. I don't think he was saying birds are delicious because they're full of ants. I'm gonna organize my papers.
Oh, wow.
So I noticed during the Mad Max Osmosis Jones crossover hellscape,
Right.
along with changing her name from Frizzle to Grizzled, she did go from a Miss to a Mrs.
Mm-hmm.
And, and surely that could not have just been a slip up that you made when naming that part.
No, you were an astute observer.
Thank you.
In fact, she stylized herself that way when she became a fearsome warlord, precisely because she felt she was married to the job of bringing her students home. TEIF, 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 TEIF. Am I right?
Are we sure that Miss Frizzle didn't kill JFK as part of a lesson in projectile motion?
No. I cannot say for sure that that did not happen. Although I would say some of the more fringe elements of this, I was going to say conspiracy theory, but I mean completely real thing that happened, was that, we don't really associate with these people, but basically one of the fringe theories of this fringe theory is that, well, this is complicated, but basically, to go into sort of the planar physics of it all, basically, the theory is that Miss Frizzle is the Baba Yaga, and that essentially she had been like siphoning away the youthful, joyous curiosity to extend her sort of pseudo-immortal life, and that the children were actually sort of. Yeah, you guys ever seen It? You know how they like don't really remember what happened to them, or maybe it's in the sequel or whatever, but they're kind of like that trauma gets kind of like paved over by the sort of weird occult magic of this shit. That's kind of what's happening, and that the documentary that we've seen it is sort of represented as the version of their lives that they have remembered instead of being captive to this sort of evil witch. Personally, I don't think that holds any water, but the RFK Jr. Thing for me does. Yeah.
TEIF.
Is the style of the Magic School Bus documentary style, what happened to the film and crew? Is there a lost episode where they're getting eaten by RFK?
Unfortunately, the friendship, the power of friendship and the scientific shenanigans or whatever I said did not extend to the film and crew. Conveniently, they had already set up like sort of a camera system throughout the school bus itself. So we are going to have a great few more seasons of this show once they get out. But you just have to pour some out, frankly, for the film, the certainly union film crew. That I almost called them scabs for fun, but that's it's a fate. Yeah. Anyway.
How do we
Yeah,
save
they're scabs.
them?
Fuck them. Yeah, they die. Yeah. But I didn't want Miss Frizzle to have hired them.
How are we going to save them?
How? That's kind of why I'm here, guys. Do you have any ideas about that? Because we could definitely sign a petition, change.gov or one of those. I was thinking like a party full maybe. We could invite him.
Do you know if RFK disappeared Mrs. Grizzled and her entire class because they were vaccinated?
Well, that's the only reason they're still alive, is because in this sort of like this basically like culture of all the vaccine preventable diseases that RFK Jr. is now just sort of this sort of like loose bag of diseases. Like if they had not been vaccinated, they would never have stood a chance, even with the incredible power of the Transformer school bus. Yeah.
So now Mrs. Grizzled, but Miss Frizzle famously has a lizard, Liz. Yeah. And I know that birds are kind of adjacently related to lizards. So do you think that RFK Jr. also has 50,000 ants inside him?
I know for sure
lizard.
he's got a lot of bugs crawling around. But I hate to tell you this, but it's actually kind of a sore subject, and one of the things that contributed to the sort of like anti-hero turn of the person now known as Mrs. Grizzled was that her lizard actually defected to the parasites.
Damn.
And is sort of their champion, and it sort of prophesies that eventually there will be one cataclysmic final battle where they will fight each other to the death and then burst out of the stomach alien style of RFK Jr. And frankly, that would actually solve a lot of other problems too. So this person who essentially has just ruined all the best things of the 90s, like the Magic School Bus and our biomedical research infrastructure.
Alf, I'm sorry, I have to interrupt you, sir. You know, this sacred space is often violated by scientists. And just a few seconds ago, I heard you use the term planar physics, and you ended your presentation by saying these data, which implies that the word data is plural, which is a pedantic distinction I've only ever heard made by scientists. I also saw the letters PhD after your name. Tell all these people what those letters stand for right now.
Pretty huge dong, brother.
Thank you, Noah.